How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. The Cincinnati Bengals start the season 0-2 once again. Now in the Zach Taylor era, the Cincinnati Bengals are a combined 1-9 in the first two games of the season. And the question now becomes, hey, how concerned should we be about this Cincinnati Bengals 0-2 start? Now, obviously, it's easy to say. We've heard it a lot. It's like, hey, been here before. Been here last year. Still made the AFC Championship game. Been here before. And that's true. I think at this point in juncture, and this is something the Bengals organization has to ask, this is something the Bengals fans ask. It's like, hey, Zach Taylor's kind of proven at this point in time he does not know how to properly game plan entering a season. When you get some tape, you get some chance to make adjustments. When you get some chances to, tinker with some things. He figures it out, and there's no arguing that because the Bengals have finished strong 2 seasons in a row. I think there's a couple things you look at for a coach, and if they're a great coach or not. One of them is, hey, how's your team enter the game? Do they enter slow? Do they enter sluggish? Because that's a reflection of the way you game plan for that game. And B, do they finish strong? Obviously, you got a game plan for the game, but if you finish strong, that means, hey, you're as a coach, you're making the proper halftime adjustments. You're making the proper adjustments throughout the game, throughout the season. And you're finding ways to coach up this team and make them better. I think we see Zach Taylor excel in the latter and struggle mightily in the prepping part and being prepared right out the gate. And we've seen that time and time again. And that's what's happening in this season. It's almost, again, this is where you say how important is it that they went 0-2. It's extremely important. You never want to start 0-2, first of all. Let's be clear about that. As far as are we worried? No, I'm not worried. But I think it's important that you go 0-2 because now you say, hey, even if the Bengals were to win every game but one this season, they still may come up one short of winning the number 1 seed. Or even if they were to go 12-2 at this point, can go 12-2, 11-2. You very well could be one game short of winning the number 1 seed. So coming into the season slow, coming into the season not clicking on all cylinders, costs you the number 1 seed. And the team that at this point in juncture, I don't think the Bengals are a playoff or bust team. I think they're a Super Bowl or bust team. And I don't want to say Super Bowl or bust doesn't make it sound like a bad thing, but I think that's what the expectations are. So if anything short of the Super Bowl, you're like, it's kind of that kind of season. Especially in the financial situation, the Bengals are still needing to sign these wide receivers. And what makes it easier to win a Super Bowl? Home field advantage to start the playoffs. So yeah, I think it is huge. This is a team that's proven time and again they can battle through the adversity of playing on the road. But hey, just because they can do it doesn't mean everybody else can. You want to force a team's hand, play at home. Make them make them beat you in your own place, in your own building. It's difficult. So yeah, that from that perspective, it's huge. It's massive. But let's really break things down here. The Bengals are 0-2. Let's talk about the losses the Bengals had last season. They lost to the Browns. They lost to the Ravens. They lost to the Steelers. And they lost to the Cowboys. Now, it may be history doesn't repeat itself, but it can rhyme. Because right now the Bengals have losses to the Ravens. They have losses to the Browns. They actually started 0-3 against the division last season. You think, you can't start 0-2 and you can't afford to do it. It's different this year because it's 0-2 against the division. Well, no, it's not different this year because it was 0-3 against the division last season. Sure, it's different teams they lost to start out the gate. They lost to a really good Dallas Cowboys team last season to start out the gate. They lost to the Steelers team they shouldn't have lost to out of the gate. Regardless, they started 0-3 against the division. They started 0-2 against the rest of the league. And we break down the schedule and say, hey, it's different this time. You look at the schedule. You got to play the 49ers. You got to play a really good Rams team. The Seahawks team that's going to be more than competitive. And absolutely, the teams you played in the NFC this season are much better than the ones they played last season. It's no cakewalk at all. Because those are 3 teams that very well could end up in the playoffs. Last season, the Bengals and the AFC North played the NFC South. Cakewalk, not okay. It was a cakewalk. Let's call it what it is. I think the team made it. Did it make it 8-9 in the playoffs, or was it 9-8? Nonetheless, it was an ugly season for them teams. The Panthers, Saints, Bucks, barely 500 teams. So it was, without question, what they're seeing this season is more difficult than what they've seen last season. Meanwhile, though, we talk about the AFC. The Bengals played the Patriots. They played the Dolphins. They played the Bills. They played the Jets last season. Now, the Dolphins, they played without Tua when they played them, or half the game without Tua. So they got away with that. But that was a tough division to play. This season, again, you're going to play Jacksonville. You're going to play Indy. You're going to play Houston. You're going to play Tennessee. I don't know what to say about the AFC South right now. I know Jacksonville's going to be a great team. I think Indy and Houston would be very beatable teams. And I think Tennessee's a wild card because I think a lot of people sleep on Tennessee. But we have to remember with Tennessee last season and the last couple seasons, their offensive line was just not good. And you got to assume they're getting that together, figuring out the better that offensive line gets, the more they can lean on Henry, the more they can have that offense they want. They bring back some of their pass rushers last season. They was decimated on that D-line with injuries last season. You bring them pass rushers back, and this is a Tennessee Titans team. Once again, that's a good team that can beat anybody. Luckily for the Bengals, that is a team the Bengals have historically under the Joe Burrow era matched up really well against and have beaten. So that is not as big of a concern there. But you look at the schedule and say it does feel like the schedule is a little bit more difficult this season for the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, you got to do what you had to do last season. You got to beat the Bills. You got to beat the Chiefs. You got to beat the Jags, the 3 division leaders, because you won your division last season. You're gonna have those matchups. But ultimately, you look at that and say, "Oh, it does feel a little bit like a gauntlet." But you looked at it last season and said, "Oh, it does feel a little bit like a gauntlet." So from a Warrior perspective, you say, it's not terrible. What's worrisome is, again, you can't, and I think this is the thing with starting 0-2, is, the Bengals did it last season, but it's not ideal. Yeah, it almost feels like everything has to go right. You have little wiggle room. Now, the Bengals did battle through injuries last season, but again, you kind of factor that in. You say, what if there's a couple injuries against a big opponent? Or maybe it's a couple injuries against a bad one. You let a game slip away. Right now, the Bengals have done a great job of not losing games they should not lose. And that should hopefully happen again this season. But again, you think about that and say 0-2, you're leaving a lot less wiggle room. You can't lose near as many games. You still got to play these teams that are really good at football. Meanwhile, though, they've proven year in and year out, slow starters, strong finishers. And if you're the Bengals, and if you're a fan, honestly, that's kind of what you want. You don't want your team to coast into playoffs. Again, historically looking, you remember the Giants. You hate to say it, but you remember the year the Steelers took out Palmer. They had to win their way in. They took the wild card. They ran the gauntlet, win the Super Bowl. The Giants have done the same thing before. We've seen this time and time again. The teams that enter the playoffs hot, that need to win in to get in, or they finish on a 4, 5, 6, 7 game win streak, tend to go deep into the playoffs compared to a team that may lose 2 of the last 3 or may lose their last game or sit the starters, whatever. So I kind of like it from that perspective. I think it gets this team going and amps them up. I think it's a team that plays very well through the adversity. It's a team that they never feel like they're down and out. So from that perspective, I think they'll be all right. I think we need to be patient. It's always difficult starting the season 0-2. Again, it's huge. There's definitely reason to be worried. There's definitely reason to have some concern, but I don't think it's a reason to hit the panic button. I don't think it's a reason to say we got to count this team out. It's not time to start saying, I've seen some people say, let's just sit Joe Burrow for his health. That's probably one of the craziest things I've seen so far. Let's sit Joe Burrow for his health. It's like, how long do we want to sit Joe Burrow? 2 weeks, 3 weeks? So the Bengals are 0-4, 0-5, 1-4, because then there's some reason to be concerned. So that's a completely different discussion for a different day, but it's really just, I think you look at it, everything on paper and say the odds just don't feel like it's with the Bengals right now. It just doesn't. Again, the teams they're going to play in these next few games, it's not like last season. Again, they're going to see the 49ers, they're going to see the Rams, they're going to see the Bills in there. They don't have this stretch of 3 or 4 games where they're playing the Jets, Falcons, and Saints like they did last season to kind of make things right, get the things going in the right direction. So it's going to be a lot harder to build the traction this time, I think, for the Bengals. And we'll see if they can do it. Again, this is a team that's been led by Joe Burrow and company, been led by this, the leadership on this team, a team of college captains, the way they like to play this or build this team. It's a team that never feels like they're down and out. It's a team that a moment never feels too big for them. And they always seem to find a way to get back on track, and they always seem to find a way to get the wins going. No question about it, though. They've got to beat the Rams. You almost have to consider this a must-win game against the Rams, because, again, you look at the schedule, and it wasn't really a game that was penciled in to struggle with. Rams are a good football team, though, a really good football team. But you play the Rams, and then you still have, again, this daunting schedule ahead of you. It's like right now you look at it and say the Bengals, and this is how big it is. Again, they have to go. If they were to go 12-3. To finish the season, is that math right? 12-3, you'd finish the season 12-5, and that's not good enough to win the number 1 seed. It might not be good enough to win your division, quite frankly, if the Ravens play the way they're playing, if the Browns play the way they're playing, because you're going to have those losses in the division. If you lose another one in the division, all of a sudden, then you have the concern. So you look at the Bengals and say, hey, that's the dilemma they're in. They have to essentially go 13-2, 14-1, and that's a lot. But it's a Bengals team that's rolled off 8 wins, 10 wins in the past. And it's a Bengals team that can do that once again. So we'll see. Love to hear your guys' thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.